The encounter. It was a quiet, cold night in the mountains. Lucas leaned back in his old wooden chair, sipping his steaming cup of coffee as the wind howled outside. His small cabin, tucked deep into the forest, was his escape from the noise of the world. He liked it that way, just him, the trees, and the stars. But tonight was different. Something felt off. The sky above the mountain peaks was unusually restless. Clouds churned, and a strange greenish glow seemed to ripple through them. Lucas frowned, setting his mug down. He stood and walked to the window, peering into the darkness. That's when he saw it, a bright streak of light cutting across the sky. It wasn't a meteor. It moved too deliberately, zigzagging before disappearing behind the trees in the distance. What the hell was that? He muttered, grabbing his flashlight. His heart raced as he stepped outside, the cold air biting at his face. The forest was silent, eerily so, as if the animals were hiding from something. He followed the faint smell of something burning. The further he went, the stronger the smell became. Then he saw it, a faint orange glow beyond the hill. Lucas's breath hitched as he climbed toward the light. When he reached the top, he froze. A small craft, no bigger than a car, lay crumpled in the clearing. Its metallic surface shimmered under the moonlight, and strange blue symbols glowed faintly along its side. Smoke billowed from the wreckage, and sparks crackled in the air. "Is this a spaceship?" Lucas whispered, his voice trembling. Then he heard it, a soft groan. His flashlight beam darted toward the sound. Lying a few feet from the wreckage was a figure, a woman. She was unlike anyone he'd ever seen. Her skin was pale, almost glowing, and her long black hair spilled across the grass like ink. Her clothes were torn, revealing strange, intricate patterns on her arms that looked like tattoos but shimmered faintly. Most unsettling were her eyes. Even in the dim light, Lucas could see them glowing that deep, unnatural red. The woman's gaze snapped to him, and Lucas stumbled back, dropping his flashlight. "Stay away," she hissed, her voice sharp and commanding. But it cracked with pain. "I'm not here to hurt you," Lucas stammered, raising his hands. "Are you human?" She didn't answer. Instead, she tried to stand, but her legs gave out beneath her. Lucas hesitated. Every instinct told him to run. Whatever she wasn't normal. But something in her expression stopped him. She looked desperate, terrified, and alone. "Let me help you," Lucas said cautiously, stepping closer. Her eyes narrowed. "You don't know what you're getting into." "Maybe not, but you're hurt. You won't survive out here." She stared at him for a long moment, then sighed, collapsing back onto the ground. "Fine. But if you betray me, I'll make you regret it." Lucas swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what she meant by that, but he wasn't about to test her. He crouched beside her, carefully helping her to her feet. She was lighter than he expected, as if she weighed almost nothing. As he draped her arm over his shoulder, she winced but didn't protest. "What's your name?" he asked as they started toward his cabin. She hesitated before answering. "Naira." "I'm Lucas." "Lucas," she repeated, her voice softer this time. "You should have stayed inside." They reached the cabin, and Lucas eased her onto the couch. He grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around her. She shivered slightly, her glowing eyes scanning the room. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her tone cautious. Lucas shrugged. "You looked like you needed it." Naira chuckled bitterly. "You might regret that soon." Before Lucas could respond, a loud hum echoed through the forest, making the windows rattle. Naira's eyes widened in alarm. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Who's coming?" Lucas demanded, but Naira didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Listen to me, Lucas," she said, her red eyes locking onto his. "You can't leave. Not now. If they find you, they'll kill you." "Who's they? What are you talking about?" Naira didn't answer. She slumped back against the couch, her energy fading fast. "Just trust me. Don't open the door. Don't let anyone in." Lucas stared at her, his mind racing. He didn't know who or what Naira was, but one thing was clear: his quiet life in the mountains was over. Outside, the hum grew louder, accompanied by strange, flickering lights in the distance. Lucas tightened his grip on the flashlight, his heart pounding. Whatever he'd just stepped into, there was no turning back now. Her true nature. The cabin was silent, save for the faint crackle of the fire Lucas had lit to keep Naira warm. She sat on the couch, her posture stiff, her glowing red eyes darting toward the window every few seconds. Outside, the forest was cloaked in darkness, and the strange hum Lucas had heard earlier had faded into an unsettling quiet. Lucas placed a steaming cup of tea on the table in front of her. "It's not much, but it's warm," he said, trying to sound calm, though his nerves were shot. Naira stared at the cup, then at Lucas, as if deciding whether or not to trust him. Slowly, she wrapped her hands around it, her long fingers delicate but strangely strong-looking. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice no longer sharp but laced with exhaustion. Lucas pulled up a chair, keeping a safe distance. He had 1,000 questions, but one burned brighter than the rest. "What are you?" Naira sighed, her glowing eyes dimming slightly as she stared into the fire. "That's a complicated question. Try me," Lucas replied, folding his arms. "I just found a wrecked spaceship in my backyard, and a woman who looks like she stepped out of a sci-fi movie. I think I can handle complicated." Naira's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "You're braver than most humans I've met." Lucas frowned. "So, you've met others?" She nodded, taking a slow sip of the tea. "A long time ago. Your kind doesn't know it, but we've been visiting this planet for centuries." "We?" Lucas leaned forward, his curiosity overpowering his fear. "My people," Naira said, her voice quiet but steady. "We come from a world far from here, one that's dying. Our sun began collapsing long ago, and we've been searching for a new home ever since. Earth." She paused, her gaze shifting to the window. "Earth is one of the few places that can sustain us." Lucas's mind spun. "You're an alien." "Yes," she said simply, "but not the kind your movies show. We're not invaders. At least, most of us aren't." The weight of her words hung in the air. Lucas struggled to process what he was hearing. "If you're not invaders, then what are you doing here?" Naira hesitated, her fingers tightening around the cup. "We're different. We don't survive the way you do. Our bodies require energy, not food. We draw it from living things, plants, animals, even humans. But it's not as sinister as it sounds." Lucas's eyes narrowed. "You're telling me you feed off of people?" "I don't," Naira said quickly, her tone defensive. "I've learned to live off the energy of plants. But others of my kind, they're not as restrained." A chill ran down Lucas's spine. "Are those the ones you're running from?" Naira nodded. "They're hunters. They see humans as nothing more than a resource. When they found out I wasn't feeding the way they do, I became a threat. That's why I fled. And that's why they're coming." Lucas leaned back in his chair, trying to make sense of it all. "So, you're saying there are other vampire aliens out there, hunting you. And now they're coming here?" "Yes," Naira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And if they find you, they'll kill you without a second thought. You've seen too much." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, his pulse racing. "Great. So I'm stuck in the middle of some intergalactic feud. What am I supposed to do? Just hide in my cabin and hope they don't find me?" Naira's gaze softened. "I didn't want to drag you into this. I tried to warn you to stay away, but you didn't listen." "Yeah, well, I've always had a thing for bad decisions," Lucas muttered. He stood and began pacing the room, his frustration bubbling over. "This is insane. I should be running for the hills, not sitting here playing host to an alien fugitive." "You could run," Naira said, her tone unreadable. But they'd find you. They're not like me. They're stronger, faster, and far less forgiving. Lucas stopped pacing and looked at her. Despite her calm demeanor, there was something deeply vulnerable about her, like she was carrying a weight too heavy for anyone to bear. "What do they want from you?" he asked. Naira hesitated, then looked him directly in the eyes. "They want me to join them, to become like them. But I won't. I won't be a monster." Lucas stared at her, a strange mix of fear and admiration swirling in his chest. Why not? If it's easier to survive their way, why fight it? Naira's expression hardened. "Because it's wrong. Taking life just to sustain my own. I can't do it. I won't do it. That's why they hate me. To them, I'm a traitor." The room fell silent again. Outside, the wind howled, and the trees creaked under its force. Lucas sat back down, his mind racing. He didn't know if he could fully trust Naira, but one thing was clear. She wasn't the real threat. Whatever was coming for her, and now for him, was far worse. "What do we do now?" Lucas asked, his voice quieter than before. Naira set the cup down and leaned forward, her glowing eyes locking onto his. "We survive. Together. The vampire's secret." The fire in the cabin crackled softly, casting long shadows on the wooden walls. Lucas leaned against the table, his arms crossed, watching Naira. She sat on the couch, her glowing red eyes dimmed to a faint ember. Despite her otherworldly appearance, there was something deeply human about the weariness etched across her face. "You need to tell me everything," Lucas said firmly. "If we're going to survive this, I need to know what I'm dealing with." Naira hesitated, her gaze shifting to the floor. She seemed to be weighing her options, deciding how much to reveal. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked up at him. "My people, we're not like you," she began, her voice steady but low. "Our evolution was shaped by our sun, a star that burned brighter and hotter than yours. Over time, our bodies adapted to absorb and process energy directly from it. But when our sun began to die, so did we. We had no choice but to find other sources of energy to survive." Lucas frowned. "And Earth became one of those sources." "Eventually, yes," Naira said. "We discovered that the life on this planet, plants, animals, even humans, contained a type of energy similar to our sun's. At first, we only observed, taking small amounts from plants and animals. But some of my people, they grew greedy. They realized humans contained more energy than anything else on the planet. Feeding on humans became an addiction for them. They stopped seeing your kind as people and started seeing you as fuel." The words hung heavy in the air. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. "And you? What about you?" Naira's expression hardened. "I refused. I couldn't bring myself to take energy from a sentient being, not when there were other ways to survive. I learned to live off plants, even though it's less efficient. But that made me an outcast. To the others, I'm weak, a traitor." Lucas tilted his head, curiosity replacing some of his fear. "If they hate you so much, why don't they just leave you alone?" Naira's glowing eyes locked onto his. "Because I know something they don't want anyone else to know. Something that could change everything." Lucas's breath hitched. "What is it?" Naira hesitated, as if the words were too dangerous to speak aloud. "Your kind, humans. You're more than just a source of energy. There's a connection between us, something ancient and forgotten. I discovered it by accident, during one of my first visits to Earth centuries ago. The energy your people possess isn't just similar to ours, it's compatible. Perfectly so." Lucas blinked, struggling to understand. "What does that mean?" "It means," Naira said, leaning forward, "that humans and my kind were never meant to be enemies. Our energies were designed to work together, to complement each other. If my people had embraced that connection instead of exploiting it, we could have lived in harmony. But the ones in power, they don't want harmony. They want control." Lucas shook his head, trying to process the revelation. So, they've been feeding on us instead of, what? Partnering with us. Naira nodded grimly. Exactly. And now, with our sun gone, and our survival dependent on energy from living beings, the leaders of my people will do anything to keep the truth buried. If the others found out that humans were more than just prey, it would destroy the foundations of their power. Lucas let out a slow breath, the weight of Naira's words sinking in. And that's why they're after you. Yes, Naira said. If I can prove what I've discovered, it could spark a revolution among my people. It could end the feeding. But to do that, I need time. And I need your help. Lucas stared at her, his mind racing. The thought of being involved in an intergalactic conspiracy was almost too much to handle. But there was something in Naira's eyes, something genuine. She wasn't lying. He could feel it. What do you need me to do? He asked, his voice steadier than he expected. Naira's gaze softened. Stay alive. Protect your energy. The others will sense it, and they'll come for you. But your energy is unique, Lucas, stronger than any human I've ever encountered. It's why I found you. Lucas frowned. What do you mean, stronger? Naira hesitated, then reached out and placed her hand gently on his arm. A warm, tingling sensation spread through him, like sunlight on a cold day. Feel that? She asked. He nodded, his pulse quickening. That's your energy, Naira said. It's pure, untainted. Most humans don't have that anymore. Centuries of pollution, stress, and war have weakened your kind's energy. But you're different. That's why I came to you. If I can prove that your energy can sustain me without harm, it could change everything. Lucas pulled his arm back, his thoughts swirling. So, what? You're saying I'm some kind of battery? Naira's lips twitched into a faint smile. Not exactly. Think of yourself more as a bridge, a living example of what's possible. Before Lucas could respond, a faint hum began to vibrate through the cabin. Naira's expression darkened, and she stood quickly, her glowing eyes scanning the room. They're here, she said, her voice sharp. We don't have much time. Lucas felt his heart leap into his throat. What do we do? Naira turned to him, her expression fierce. We fight, together. The chase begins. The hum outside grew louder, vibrating through the floorboards of the cabin. Lucas froze, his eyes darting toward the window. Faint, flickering lights danced between the trees, moving unnaturally fast. It was like watching fireflies, but there was something menacing about the way they moved, calculated, predatory. They're scanning. Naira whispered, her voice tense. She moved to the window, peeking through the curtains. Her glowing red eyes dimmed slightly as if she were trying to suppress their light. They're looking for my energy signature. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest. How long before they find us? Naira turned to him, her face grim. Minutes, maybe less. Their technology is advanced. They'll pinpoint this cabin soon. Lucas grabbed the flashlight from the table, his hands shaking. Okay, so what's the plan? Do we fight them here? Or... No, Naira interrupted sharply. If we stay, we're dead. They'll burn this place to the ground without hesitation. Great, Lucas muttered, his voice thick with sarcasm. So we run. Naira nodded, already moving toward the door. There's a cave system about 2 miles west of here. The terrain is rugged. It'll slow them down and give us a chance to hide. Lucas hesitated, glancing around the cabin. It wasn't much, but it was his home. The thought of abandoning it to alien hunters filled him with a deep sense of loss. But he didn't have time to dwell. Naira was already at the door, waiting. Lucas, she said, her voice softer. I know this is hard, but if we stay, they'll kill us both. You have to trust me. He took a deep breath, nodding. Let's go. The two of them slipped out into the freezing night, the forest eerily silent except for the hum that seemed to follow them. Naira led the way, her movements swift and precise despite her earlier injuries. Lucas struggled to keep up, his flashlight bouncing in his hand as he navigated the uneven ground. "Turn that off," Naira hissed over her shoulder. "They'll see the light." Reluctantly, Lucas clicked the flashlight off, plunging them into near-total darkness. His eyes adjusted slowly, and he focused on Naira's faintly glowing figure ahead of him. "How do you know about these caves?" he whispered, his breath visible in the cold air. "I scouted the area before I landed," Naira replied. "I always prepare for the worst." Lucas wanted to ask more, but the hum grew louder, cutting through the stillness like an approaching storm. He glanced back and saw the flickering lights weaving through the trees, closer than before. "They're gaining on us," he said, his voice tight with panic. Naira stopped abruptly, pulling him behind a large tree. She pressed a finger to her lips, signaling him to stay quiet. The lights slowed, spreading out as if they were searching. Lucas held his breath, his back pressed against the rough bark. He could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Suddenly, a beam of light shot past them, narrowly missing their hiding spot. The tree crackled and hissed where the beam hit, the bark disintegrating into ash. Lucas swallowed hard, his mind racing. These weren't just hunters, they were armed. Naira grabbed his arm, pulling him close. "We need to move." Slowly, quietly. They crept through the underbrush, every step agonizingly deliberate. The lights continued to sweep the area, and Lucas could hear faint, mechanical clicking sounds that sent shivers down his spine. He didn't dare look back. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a rocky incline. Naira began climbing, her movements fluid and almost inhumanly graceful. Lucas followed, his muscles straining as he scrambled up the uneven rocks. The hum of their pursuers faded slightly, drowned out by the sound of the wind rushing through the trees. When they reached the top, Lucas saw the entrance to the caves, a dark, jagged opening in the side of the hill. Naira ushered him inside, her eyes scanning the forest below. "They'll track us here eventually," she said, her tone grim. "But this gives us a head start." Lucas leaned against the cave wall, struggling to catch his breath. "How do we stop them? Or are we just going to keep running?" Naira turned to him, her expression unreadable. "We can't outrun them forever. But there's a chance we can outsmart them." "How?" Lucas asked, his frustration boiling over. "They've got weapons, technology, numbers. We've got a cave." Naira stepped closer, her glowing eyes locking onto his. "We've got you." Lucas blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" Naira hesitated, then placed her hand on his chest, just above his heart. A warmth spread through him, and for a brief moment, he felt a strange sense of calm. "Your energy," she said. "It's unlike anything they've encountered before. If I can amplify it, we might be able to disrupt their scanners, maybe even disable their weapons." Lucas stared at her, disbelief written all over his face. "You want to use me as some kind of alien EMP." "More like a beacon," Naira corrected. "But it's dangerous. If we do this wrong, it could kill you." "Of course it could," Lucas muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Why not?" Naira's expression softened. "I won't force you. But if we don't try, they'll find us. And they won't show mercy." Lucas looked at her, then at the cave entrance where the faint hum was starting to grow louder again. He took a deep breath, his fists clenching at his sides. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "Let's do it." A shocking revelation. The cave was eerily silent, save for the occasional drip of water echoing through the darkness. Lucas sat on a cold rock, his back pressed against the rough wall. His chest rose and fell rapidly as he tried to process Naira's plan. And the danger it posed. She stood a few feet away, her glowing red eyes dimmed, as if she were trying to suppress her emotions. "So," Lucas said, breaking the silence, "you're telling me my energy is some kind of superpower?" Naira turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Not exactly. It's more like a rare resource." Something my people have only encountered a few times in the past, and even then, never in this concentration. Lucas frowned. What do you mean, this concentration? Naira hesitated, then crouched in front of him, her gaze steady. Your energy isn't just strong. It's pure, untouched. Most humans have traces of what we call energetic pollution. Stress, fear, anger. It clouds their natural energy. But you're different. You're like a beacon. Lucas shook his head, confused. That doesn't make any sense. I'm just a guy. I live in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing special about me. Naira's lips twitched into a faint smile. You don't see it, but I do. Your energy. It's unlike anything I've ever felt. That's why I came to you. It wasn't an accident, Lucas. I tracked your energy signature across half the galaxy. Lucas's breath hitched. Wait, you're saying you came here specifically for me? Yes, Naira said simply. I didn't crash on Earth by chance. I was looking for you. I didn't know what I'd find, but when I detected your energy, I knew you could be the key to everything. Lucas leaned back, his mind racing. The key to what? Naira's expression turned somber. To ending the conflict between my people and yours. To proving that humans and my kind can coexist without harm. If I can show the others that your energy can sustain me, and that it doesn't have to be taken by force, it could change everything. And what happens to me in this grand plan of yours? Lucas asked, his voice sharp. Do I get a say, or am I just a lab rat? Naira flinched but didn't look away. You always have a choice. I would never force you to do anything. But the truth is, if we don't try this, we won't survive the night. The hunters will find us, and they'll kill us both. This is our only chance. Lucas let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his hair. Great. So, no pressure. The hum outside the cave grew louder, and Naira stood, her body tense. She glanced toward the entrance, her glowing eyes narrowing. They're close. We need to act now. Lucas stood as well, his fists clenching at his sides. Fine. Let's do this. What do I have to do? Naira stepped closer, her expression softening. You need to trust me. I'm going to tap into your energy, just enough to create a field around us. It should confuse their sensors and disable their weapons, at least temporarily. But it's going to feel intense. How intense? Lucas asked warily. Naira hesitated, like standing in the middle of a lightning storm. Lucas swallowed hard. Fantastic. Naira reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm. A warm, tingling sensation spread through him, growing stronger by the second. His heart raced, and his breathing quickened. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, like every nerve in his body was suddenly alive. Focus, Naira said, her voice steady. Don't fight it. Let the energy flow. Lucas closed his eyes, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He felt a strange pull, as if something deep inside him was waking up. The warmth intensified, and he felt a surge of power course through him, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Good, Naira murmured. You're doing great. The hum outside turned into a sharp whine, and the cave shook slightly. Lucas opened his eyes just in time to see Naira raise her hands, a shimmering field of light forming around them. The light pulsed in time with his heartbeat, growing brighter with each passing second. They're here, Naira said, her voice tight. Hold on. A blinding beam of light shot into the cave, but it stopped short, colliding with the field Naira had created. The beam flickered and then dissipated, leaving the hunters momentarily stunned. Lucas could hear their mechanical clicking sounds, now frantic and disorganized. It's working, Naira said, her tone triumphant. Their systems are failing. But Lucas wasn't listening. His body felt like it was on fire, his energy surging beyond his control. Naira, he gasped, his voice strained. I can't. It's too much. Naira turned to him, her expression filled with concern. Stay with me, Lucas. You're stronger than this. You can do it. I don't know how, Lucas said, his knees buckling. The light around them began to flicker, and the hunters outside started to recover. Naira stepped closer, placing both hands on his shoulders. Listen to me, she said firmly. Your energy is like a river. Don't try to stop it, guide it. Let it flow through you. Lucas took a shaky breath, closing his eyes again. He imagined the energy as a current, wild and powerful, but not uncontrollable. Slowly, he began to focus, directing it toward the field around them. The light stabilized, growing brighter and more intense. Outside, the hunters let out a series of sharp metallic screeches as their sensors overloaded. One by one, their lights blinked out, and the hum faded into silence. When it was over, Lucas collapsed to the ground, his body trembling. Naira knelt beside him, her expression a mix of relief and worry. You did it, she said softly. You saved us. Lucas let out a weak laugh. Yeah, well, remind me not to do that again. Naira smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. We're not out of danger yet. They'll be back, and next time, they'll be prepared. Lucas nodded, his exhaustion giving way to determination. Then we'll be ready for them. The final stand. The cave fell into an eerie silence after the hunters' systems failed. Lucas lay sprawled on the cold ground, his chest heaving as he tried to regain his strength. The shimmering field of energy around him flickered out, leaving the space dim and heavy with tension. Naira knelt beside him, her glowing red eyes scanning his face. You're stronger than I thought, she said softly, her voice a mixture of admiration and concern. Lucas gave a weak chuckle. I don't feel strong. I feel like I got hit by a truck. You channeled more energy than most of my kind could handle, Naira said, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. But we can't rest yet. They'll regroup, and when they come back, they'll be ready for us. Lucas forced himself to sit up, his muscles protesting with every movement. What do we do now? We can't just keep running. Naira's expression hardened. We won't. This time, we make a stand. Lucas raised an eyebrow. A stand? Against alien vampires with advanced tech. Sounds like a suicide mission. Naira stood, her movements sharp and purposeful. It's a calculated risk. We have an advantage now. They think you're just a human. They don't understand the extent of your energy. If we strike first, we might have a chance to catch them off guard. Lucas rubbed his temples, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Okay, let's say we do this. How? I don't exactly have an arsenal lying around. Naira turned to him, a glint of determination in her eyes. Your energy is the weapon. We'll use it to create a pulse, a concentrated burst that can disable their systems permanently. Lucas frowned. You mean like an EMP? Something like that, Naira said, but more precise. We'll lure them into a trap, force them into a confined space, and then unleash the pulse. Lucas hesitated. And what happens to me when we do that? Last time, it felt like my body was going to explode. Naira's expression softened, and she crouched in front of him, meeting his gaze. It's risky. The pulse will push you to your limits, but I'll be there to guide you, to take some of the strain. Together, we can do this. Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't suppose we have another option. Not unless you want to spend the rest of your life running, Naira said. And even then, they'd catch us eventually. Lucas nodded, his jaw tightening. All right, let's do it. Setting the trap. Naira led Lucas deeper into the cave system, the air growing colder and damper with every step. The rocky walls were jagged, and water dripped from the ceiling, forming shallow pools on the ground. They found a narrow passage that opened into a large chamber, its high ceiling disappearing into shadows. This will work, Naira said, surveying the space. It's tight enough to funnel them in, but large enough for us to maneuver. Lucas looked around, his unease growing. And how exactly do we lure them here? Naira turned to him, her expression unreadable. We let them sense us. Lucas's stomach dropped. You're kidding. They're already tracking me, Naira said. But if you amplify your energy, it'll draw them in like moths to a flame. They won't be able to resist. Lucas swallowed hard. And if the pulse doesn't work? Naira's gaze hardened. Then we fight until we can't. The hunters arrive. Lucas sat cross-legged in the center of the chamber, his eyes closed as he tried to focus. Naira stood beside him, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders, guiding him. Breathe, she said softly. Focus on the energy inside you. Feel it flowing through your body. Lucas took a deep breath, his mind quieting. A warmth began to spread through him, the familiar sensation of his energy awakening. It started as a gentle hum, growing stronger with each passing second. The air around him seemed to vibrate, charged with invisible power. Outside the cave, the hum of the hunter's approach grew louder. The flickering lights appeared in the tunnel, casting long, shifting shadows on the walls. Lucas's pulse quickened, but he kept his focus. They're here, Naira whispered. Stay calm. Let them come to us. The first hunter stepped into the chamber, its tall, humanoid form shrouded in sleek, black armor that glistened like oil. Its glowing eyes scanned the space, locking onto Lucas. Behind it, more hunters poured in, their movements smooth and synchronized. Lucas felt a spike of fear, but Naira's steady voice cut through it. Hold your focus. Don't let them break you. The hunters moved closer, forming a semicircle around them. One of them raised its arm, and a sharp, metallic clicking sound filled the air. A weapon extended from its wrist, its tip glowing ominously. Now, Lucas, Naira shouted. Lucas opened his eyes, and a blinding light erupted from his body, filling the chamber with an intense, pulsating glow. The hunters froze, their systems glitching as the energy wave washed over them. Sparks flew from their armor, and their glowing eyes dimmed. Naira placed her hands on Lucas's back, channeling her own energy into him. Keep it steady, she urged. We're almost there. The light grew brighter, and the hunters began to collapse one by one, their bodies twitching as their systems shut down. The air crackled with raw power, and Lucas felt his strength waning, his vision blurring. Lucas, just a little longer, Naira said, her voice strained. With a final surge of effort, Lucas released the last of his energy, the pulse exploding outward in a wave of white light. The remaining hunters crumpled to the ground, their armor smoking. Aftermath. When the light faded, Lucas collapsed onto the cold stone floor, his body trembling. Naira knelt beside him, her expression filled with relief. You did it, she said softly, brushing a hand over his forehead. They're gone. Lucas let out a weak laugh, his voice barely audible. I feel like I got hit by lightning. Naira smiled, her glowing eyes softening. You're stronger than you think, Lucas. He forced himself to sit up, glancing at the motionless forms of the hunters. Will more of them come? Eventually, Naira admitted, but we've bought ourselves time. And now, they know what you're capable of. They'll think twice before coming after us again. Lucas nodded, a flicker of determination in his eyes. Good. Let's make sure they regret it. The truth unveiled. The morning sun crept through the cracks in the rocky cave entrance, casting soft beams of light onto the battered floor. The metallic remains of the hunters lay scattered like fallen shadows, their once glowing eyes now dull and lifeless. Lucas leaned against the cave wall, his body sore and drained but alive. Naira sat across from him, her glowing red eyes dimmed, her face a mix of exhaustion and quiet relief. For a moment, the only sound was the steady drip of water echoing through the cavern. Lucas broke the silence first, his voice hoarse but steady. We survived. Somehow. Naira nodded, her lips curving into a faint smile. You did more than survive. Lucas, you changed the outcome. He raised an eyebrow, his tone laced with exhaustion. What do you mean? Naira shifted closer, her movements slow and deliberate, as if every step cost her energy she didn't have. When you unleashed that pulse, it wasn't just an attack. It was a message, a ripple across dimensions. My people will feel it. They'll know something happened here. Lucas blinked, struggling to process her words. A message? What kind of message? Naira's gaze softened. A warning. And a hope. The energy you released, it wasn't just destructive. It carried your signature, your essence. It was pure, Lucas. Untouched by fear or greed. It's something my people haven't felt in centuries. It's proof that humans and my kind are connected in ways we've forgotten. Lucas shook his head, still trying to wrap his mind around everything. So, you're saying that I'm some kind of beacon for your people? In a way, yes, Naira said. Your energy is a reminder of what we once were, and what we could be again. It's a challenge to the ones in power who've turned my people into predators. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, his frustration bubbling to the surface. You keep saying I'm special, that my energy is different. But why? What makes me so different from everyone else? Naira hesitated, her expression unreadable. Because your ancestors were like mine. Lucas froze, the weight of her words sinking in. What are you talking about? Naira sat down beside him, her voice quiet but steady. A long time ago, before your species had written history, there was a connection between our worlds. My people visited Earth not as invaders, but as allies. We shared knowledge, culture, even bloodlines. It was a time of unity, of mutual growth. But something happened, something that tore us apart. My people grew desperate as our sun began to die, and the bond we shared with humanity was forgotten, replaced by fear and exploitation. Lucas stared at her, his heart pounding. You're saying, I'm part alien? Naira nodded. A distant part, yes. It's why your energy is so unique. It carries the remnants of our shared past, a purity that's been diluted in most humans over time. That connection is what drew me to you. Lucas let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. This is insane. I'm just some guy who wanted to live in the middle of nowhere. Not some cosmic link between two species. Naira placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and grounding. I know it's a lot to take in, but whether you believe it or not, your existence changes everything. You're living proof that our people were never meant to be enemies. Lucas looked down at his hands, his mind racing. So what now? Do we just wait for your people to show up? Naira's expression darkened. Not all of them will welcome this truth. The leaders, the hunters, they'll see you as a threat. They'll do everything they can to silence you. Fantastic, Lucas muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. So, I'm a target now. Great. Naira's grip on his shoulder tightened. You're more than a target, Lucas. You're a spark, a chance to change everything. If we can find others like you, others who carry the connection, we can build a bridge between our worlds again. Lucas let out a long breath, the weight of the responsibility settling on his shoulders. And if we can't? Naira's eyes gleamed with determination. Then we fight, together. A new resolve. The two of them stepped out of the cave, the sunlight warming their faces. The forest around them was alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves, as if nature itself was unaware of the battle that had just taken place. Lucas squinted at the horizon, a newfound resolve in his chest. I don't know what's out there, he said, glancing at Naira, but I'm not running anymore. Naira smiled, a rare expression that softened her sharp features. Good, because the fight isn't over. Lucas turned to her, a question lingering in his mind. What happens if your people come here? The ones who believe in this connection, will they help us? They'll try, Naira said, but it won't be easy. The old ways are deeply rooted, and fear is a powerful weapon. That's why we need to move quickly, to find the others like you before the hunters do. Lucas nodded, his jaw tightening. Then let's get started. As they walked into the forest, Lucas felt the weight of his new reality pressing down on him. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a symbol, a link to a forgotten truth. And while the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: he wasn't alone. Naira walked beside him, her presence a constant reminder of the battle they'd just won, and the war still to come. Together, they would face whatever came next, forging a path toward a future where their two worlds could finally coexist.